By Xingjian, bronze being smelted. Within the forged bellows, it is being smelted into an object. In a vast furnace about to become patterned bronze. From the purple gleam, it can be seen to gradually emerge. In the crimson air, one gazes even more deeply. In the blazing heat, clouds in the clear sky change. Under the drifting smoke, the light of day darkens. The firm and the hard originate in my nature. The blowing and smelting depend upon your heart. Leaping up is in vain and will only signal you are different. Hiding deep away, you can naturally command respect. When can the utensil be brought to completion? It must wait to consult one who really understands it. So here we have a poem by Xingjian. And as this is a poet that was not included in the collection of the 300 Tang poets, we're going to start by giving a brief biography of him, and then we will comment a little bit on this poem. We will only include one of his in this expansion of the collection. So who is Bai Xingjiang? Well, he is related to a poet I've talked to you about recently. He was the younger brother of Bai Juji. Like him, he therefore came from a family that had moderate success in scholar officialdom. He passed the Jinshi examination in 807. He had several provincial posts, and late in life served in some lower mid-level positions at court as Reminder of the Right and vice director of the Bureau of Receptions. He was considered to be a talented writer in the style of his brother. Most of his poetry has been lost, though, and in fact today he probably has a bigger reputation as a writer of prose, of chuanqi. Chuanqi was a genre of short stories that flourished during the Tang Dynasty. And he is the author of one of the most famous ones, the story of Miss Li, the tale of Li Hua Zhuan. And well, we're not going to delve or to explain his narrative texts, but we will just say he's a very important Chuanxi writer. In poetry, only 7 of his Shi have survived. He wrote also a lot of Fu, of which 19 have been preserved. But again, these Fu were the basis of much of his contemporary reputation, but they're not the type of poetry that would be included in the anthology we've been working with. Just as a curiosity, one of his Fu has been rescued from the texts found at Dunhuang, the Da Le Fu. It's a weird poem, actually, because it's a prose poem on the greatest pleasure here being sex. So, generally scholar official poetry is quite prudish. So this is curious. Okay, then let's go with today's poem, Jin Zai Rong, Bronze Being Smelted. So this is a weird poem. It's a very, very Daoistically inclined poem in the images, probably in the topic. So just like Baijuji's Grasses, which is included in the anthology, this is probably an exercise to prepare for the Jinshi examination. So remember that the examination for becoming a scholar official was mainly literary. And it was in many aspects very different from how examinations later developed in China, in that it was still not an anonymous or presumably partially objective sort of thing. In fact, the candidates knew their examiners, and they visited their examiners before the examination, and they frequently wrote collections of their poems to give to the examiners. So influencing your possible examiner was accepted and was considered something reasonable, and there was this. The Tang was still an aristocratic age of personal contacts, and even though it was starting to evolve towards that meritocratic examination system that would crystallize in the next dynasty in the Song. So this is a typical poem from that regard. As you will see, it's a poem about an object being forged in a furnace, but the implied metaphorical meaning is pretty transparent. It's like the poet who's writing the poem is the object. He's a beautiful object, but he needs the appreciation of the person who is going to, recognize the value of the object. And so it's a very plain metaphor on being recognized by the examiner. As I was saying before, for me the poem has a Taoistic flavor because it was very typical in some Taoist texts to talk about refining processes and through which one would shed one's moral coil and achieve a transcendence. Some of the practices that Taoists engaged in to achieve this purification of the flesh were religious, like prayers and rituals, and ascetic practices, and dietary and meditative activities. But they also dabbled a lot in alchemy. They became famous for that, and they produced different alchemical concoctions and elixirs in the search for the pills of immortality, for the equivalent in Chinese culture of the philosopher's stone. So there are a lot of Taoist poems, I think, with images of metalworking, and this poem includes images that are taken not only from the practice of Taoists, but from the texts, probably from the Chuang-Tzu, which in the great revered teacher chapter includes a comparison of the creator as a master smith. So, topic of the poem, we're describing bronze being smelted, just as the title is saying. But as I said, the implicit topic, it's not just a description of this artifact being made, but rather of the appreciation of someone who is going to see the hidden utility, the true utility of the utensil which is being forged, and therefore who is going to truly know the person who is represented by the utensil. And the implicit notion also is, hey, you're gonna help me pass the exams, and that will go to enhance that will contribute to an enhancement of your reputation because you've chosen a wise person. The one who knows me is a very typical metaphor in classical Chinese texts, and I think one of the first instances is a story about a musician and his friend, and after one of them died, the other side, and I think the musician stopped playing because he said, now no one really knows me, now no one can really understand how I feel and what I'm trying to express when I play. But this became a very common trope because in Chinese Confucian political theory, it's a great deal of importance is placed on being able to gauge people effectively. The ruler is meant to be able to choose the people to serve as ministers by being able to really know them beyond appearances, to really, really detect their moral virtue and their intellectual abilities, which can only be made evident once one has been selected and put to serve in office. And also other scholar officials were supposed to contribute in the selection process of new candidates, and they were expected to be disinterested in choosing and selecting the best, even if that implied a possible competition in serving in office. And that was a difficult task, because people always want to show their better face when they want to be chosen for service, and really detecting which ones are not only intellectually smart but morally and ethically good is something that a lot of Chinese texts and poems repeatedly go around and around and around. So this poem, enough with the introduction, let's take a look at the poem couplet by couplet as we usually do. And this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. This is not exactly a regulated poem. It's pentasyllabic, and it shows heavy parallelism in the middle couplets, especially the second and the third, probably even the fourth. So it's one couplet, 2 couplets, 3, 4, 5. It's 6 couplets. So it's not a regulated poem, it seems, but it's pretty close. First couplet. Within the forge bellows, it is being smelted into an object in a vast furnace about to become patent bronze. So the first couplet follows the title and, puts us in a situation. We are in some sort of a forge or a smithy, and an object is being made. The bellows are blowing, the metal is being melted, and it's going to be given a shape, and it's going to become patent bronze. I imagine patent bronze here refers to just decorated, a beautiful piece of bronze. Bronze was the preferred material in ancient China for pots and ritual vessels. So it was very prestigious material. Second couplet. So the first couplet puts us in a situation, we're in a forge, we're making this object. Second couplet. From the purple gleam, it can be seen to gradually emerge. In the crimson air, one gazes even more deeply. So the process is ongoing. The second couplet, which is heavily parallelistic, purple gleam, crimson air, gradually emerge, gaze deeply. The second couplet obscures the object from us. In the first couplet, the object is being made, but in the second one, we can't quite see it. It's still hidden away, whether it be by a purple gleam or by the crimson air of the forge, of the heat, of the warmth. But it's not really hiding, actually. We have images of seeing in this couplet of you can gleam the object. Well, there's a purple gleam and the object can be seen, and in the crimson air, one makes an even greater effort to gaze, to see it. These images of seeing are connected with the image later on of recognition. The object is about to appear. Someone has to look in and see it through the fire and smoke. And the seeing might be difficult. It might be impeded by elements. And this, as we said, can act as a metaphor for the difficulties a person from a poor background or from a family that is not known might have in being recognized by people in higher positions, including the recipient, the imagined recipient of this poem. The third couplet continues with these images. It expands, it takes us away from the space of the forge into a greater background, but it feels like a reworking, a re-echoing of the second couplet, maybe with different images, but it's also heavily parallelistic. In the blazing heat, clouds in the clear sky change. Under the drifting smoke, the light of day darkens. So this creative process inside the forge escapes the confines of said forge, and it seems to be affecting the outward world. So in this heat that is generated in the forge, clouds seem to change in the sky, and not seem, they actually change. The verb, it says change, not seem to change. The light of day darkens, so we have this image of smoke and clouds and heat, and they are escaping the confines of the forge and affecting the outside world, again with images of blockage of sight, which very easily can be transposed to the blocking of the possibilities of one's promotion. There is a change now in the next couplet, which is the fourth. Yeah, in the fourth couplet there is a change in the poem. So we go inside. Well, let's read it and then we explain it. The firm and the hard originate in my nature. The blowing and smelting depend upon your heart. So in the fourth couplet, it's as if the object that is being forged and which we haven't seen yet directly starts speaking to us, directly expresses what's on his mind or his true nature. It says, the firm and the hard originate in my nature. The blowing and smelting depend upon your heart. So the object is addressing the maker and saying, I am endowed as an object with some properties by nature. They're coming naturally to me. Hardness, firmness, which, are the hardness and firmness of metal, but are also, metaphorically, the hardness and firmness of a virtuous person who has a strong moral character, which is not going to be bent. the blowing and smelting depend upon your heart. So this is interesting. This couplet really has this dissociation. It's really saying, I am virtuous and honest, but this virtue is not seen, is not perceived. We require the forger. We require you to blow and smelt. That is, I require your recognition so that my true nature really comes out. So my true nature being exposed depends on your will. Heart in classical Chinese and Japanese is not so much the abode of feeling, it's the abode of reason, of the mind, of discernment. The next couplet, fifth one, continues this line of direct, you could say, imprecation by the object slash speaker to the patron to be slash smelter. Leaping up is in vain and will only signal you are different. Hiding deep away, you can naturally command respect. So this presents a paradoxical statement which is played very frequently in classical Chinese poetry. What should the person who seeks recognition do? And, Chinese poetry reflects the values, the ethos of the scholar official community, and they have this, to us, perhaps slightly hypocritical attitude of, one shouldn't exhibit oneself too much like a peacock. If one is meritorious and virtuous, other people will recognize him. And that's what he's saying here. After saying, I have a good inner nature, you're the one who has to detect it and publicize it and promote it. Now he's saying, there are some who try to promote themselves, but this is pointless. Leaping up in vain will only show that you're different, but it won't show that you are virtuous. On the contrary, sometimes it's the hidden ones who by hiding, who by not showing themselves excessively ambitious or interested in being promoted or in serving, they are the ones who are the truly virtuous ones, which leads to the paradox. The ones who most deserve being employed are the ones that are harder to find and to get to accept employment in the first place. And, this plays out in a lot of Chinese stories and traditions of good, virtuous rulers or ministers searching for other ministers among people who are hiding away, who are fishermen or cooks or hermits living in caves, etc. They have to go and fetch that person, convince him to serve in office, and they have to guess beforehand that that person is actually really virtuous, even though he looks like just a poor, miserable person. So Bai Xingjian is presenting himself here as almost like this sort of hidden person who doesn't flaunt his possible virtues, but who is expecting, who considers himself virtuous and is expecting the recipient of the poem to be of that discerning sort of type, that wise sort of man who is able to detect talents and promote them, and therefore also shine in the sunlight, in the borrowed sunlight from the future prospects of this virtuous person once he is successful. Last couplet, and the last couplet just closes in on this image. When can the utensil be brought to completion? It must wait to consult one who really understands it. When can I, the utensil, can be brought to completion? When can I flourish and serve and do good? Only when you recognize me. Only when one who really understands me checks me up and helps me succeed. So, I don't think it's a wonderful poem in many aspects, but I think it's witty and interesting, and it shows some interesting Daoistic imagery, and which I think is a good contribution to this collection of poems we are here reading.